When people ask, how do I get into Kamen Rider? Or what does it mean to you? Many people have different answers to such questions as those. I've been a fan of Kamen Rider for about 13 years now, and it's become a favorite franchise of mine that I honestly can't compare it to anything else on this space rock. It really has its own unique identity. Being a workaround on the basis of Shotaro Ishinomori's Skullman to Crossfire, to eventually the cyborg masked motorcycle superhero we know today, Kamen Rider has had a very huge impact on Japanese pop culture. Let me break it down for the normies. Anyone growing up in the 90s and 2000s can immediately tell you who these guys are. Similarly, in Japan 2 decades prior, people can immediately tell you who these guys are. But ever since his unfortunate passing in 1998, Kamen Rider, as well as its younger cousin Super Sentai, have been a part of generations for many to experience, including the men behind today's subject, Hideaki Anno. Many people associate Anno as the man behind the anime classic Neon Genesis Evangelion, but also has quite the portfolio in both anime as well as Japanese filmmaking, making quite the impact in pop culture as well. His other works, just to name a few, involve Gunbuster, part of the animation of Hayao Miyazaki's Nausicaa, and some of Giant Robo. And most notably on the tokusatsu side of things, his involvement with Daikon Films' Return of Ultraman, as well as the live-action Cutie Honey movie. And for those who know Anno, he's a man who knows his tokusatsu and respects the art of the genre. And it shows that without his love and passion for it, things like Evangelion wouldn't have been possible. Hence why he made such short film, and why he cosplayed as Kamen Rider Ichigo for both cons and at a wedding he was at. Decades later, he was given the opportunity to work alongside Shinji Higuchi to work on some of the reboots for Japan's biggest tokusatsu franchises, starting with Shin Godzilla. After its success, they were given the opportunity to work again with Shin Ultraman, which I reviewed before and liked despite not being an Ultraman fan. Yet, Anno decides to ride solo for another childhood favorite of his, and is why I traveled to Japan in the first place. It has been exactly 1 year since the modern reboot of the 1971 classic made its debut in Japanese theaters, becoming not only the second biggest film during its opening weekend, but also the highest grossing Kamen Rider film to date since All Riders vs. Dai Shocker, which as a Decade fan and cosplayer is surprising to see. And while the consensus were positive from critics, fans in general were mixed about the film as a whole, some loving it, others being in the middle, and certain egotistical dipshits refusing to give credit where credit is due, albeit being based as based already is. Or at least I came across one dipshit that was a dick to me in person anyway. As a part of the Shin Japan Heroes universe, after Evangelion made such a cultural impact in anime history, on top of the success of Shin Godzilla and Shin Ultraman, Hideaki Anno was given a shot to give Kamen Rider the Shin treatment as a part of the franchise's 50th anniversary for 2021. But due to COVID getting in the way of things, the film got pushed back to 2023 instead. And you bet your ass it was my most anticipated film of the year. I saw it once in Japan, twice here in the States, and I lost count online. Yeah, I have a problem. And I got as much Shin merch as I did while over there. I wish I got this Cyclone drink holder during my visit, but better late than never, I guess. But if you're a newcomer and wondering if this is worth starting, I'm gonna say this right now. Watch it. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm also gonna be spoiling this, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then just skip this video and come back to it later. And for those of you wondering if I'm gonna be mentioning the Shocker side story manga that adds more depth to the characters of the Augments and Shocker, I'm not gonna bother with it since I haven't read it yet. One thing to note is that while it may not be an abridged take on the story as some might make it out to be, it still has its own unique identity to make those unfamiliar ask, what is a Kamen Rider? Drawing inspiration not only from the show itself, but the manga as well as unused concepts on top of that. Within the first 20 minutes, we get a genuine representation of what happened in episode 1. And in that time, we get an idea of who our characters are, the origin of Takeshi Hongo's conversion into a cyborg, his confrontation against Shocker and Spider-Man, or Kumo Agu in this case. The protagonist coming to the realization of I'm not human anymore, This is my burden I have to carry, and with the hero riding to fight the next baddie of the week. It encapsulates the first episode as beautifully as it can. The film also changes a few things around, and adds a little more realism and modernism to the story while also maintaining the fantastical elements that were carried over as well. Though the beginning starts with a chase scene against Shocker. The only difference between here and 1971 are two things. Ruriko is the one that's about to get her eyes gouged out instead of the professor, and the cyborg conversion basically made Ichigo go full-on Saitama towards Shocker. I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw this in Japan, my mind was like, oh! But in actuality, I just widened my eyes. Then after producing Shocker Jelly, Hongo contemplates about being human after being confronted by Shocker and takes off his helmet to reveal his cyborg self. This moment right here is accurate to the manga. And then we get Hongo gripping Ruriko's arms, questioning his own strength after some exposition from the professor about why he chose Hongo to be his most advanced creation out of all the other augments, as well as how the tech works and the inclusion of his aura-like essence called prana, which is basically on the lines of, if you don't use enough of it, game over. Though to my surprise, prana is actually from the Hindi word of the same name, referring to life force, energy, and vital principle. A couple of things to note about this scene is that the moment we see Hongo Takeshi, he still feels and sounds like Hongo Takeshi. And the film does a great job at giving his character even more depth than we've ever seen in the show. But I'll explain more about why later. Portraying him is Sosuke Ikematsu, who you might recognize as one of the kids in The Last Samurai, which coincidentally also featured Shun Sugata, Kamen Rider Z-Cross himself as well. But when he speaks, you can clearly tell Sosuke really captures the inflections and stoicism of the character that Hiroshi Fujioka does, which Anno also recognized when Sosuke sent his audition to him. Now keep in mind, Fujioka is still a boss today, and will always be Takeshi Hongo. But the thing is, when we later see his father in the film get killed by a criminal, it adds emotion and regretful weight to his character. And it's really beautiful and relatable with changes like this. Even when he says he doesn't want to repeat the same mistakes as his father did, it's so great how they brought a new Hongo Takeshi to the big screen. Another thing I personally thought was funny, though it happens very fast, is when Ruriko gives a quick rundown on Hongo's character in like 3 sentences, and after being called out for his unemployment and being a glum chum, he just looks at the camera the same way Jim does in The Office. After that, we see Ruriko give Hongo the traditional red muffler, which is supposed to symbolize the heroism that the color red does, as opposed to it just being a part of the design just because, which is also a nice inclusion as to why it's there. And then Kumo-Ogu raids the cabin and kills the professor like in the show, and even recreates the foamy soap disintegration death as well. Though I do question the bajillion spider drones literally just there hiding in Ruriko, like, why use that many instead of the one that Hongo swatted and just called a day? But anyway, after carrying Ruriko unconscious, he blows up the cabin with Hongo still trapped in spider goo, and obviously he survives because plot armor. And this scene with the first Henshin, it's such a beautiful and well-shot sequence. It's really something I can watch over and over again and not get tired of it. It really is one of the many best things about this film, by far. Omedetou, Anno-san. You did a great job recreating this scene. After that happens, we see the iconic first battle with Hongo against Shocker and Kumo-Ogu, like in the show, complete with the jumping at low angles and adding that brutality scene in the first 2 minutes. While Kumo-Ogu is pressuring Hongo while fighting him in the sense of, killing is fun, why don't you see happiness in that? And Hongo performing the cleanest rider kick to finish him off, which to my surprise was actually CGI, which makes or breaks this film. Having a budget of $15.8 million, it's something that looks impressive if it's very fast and subtle, like I mentioned with the rider kick and the henshin. Hell, even the shaky zoom shot of Hongo on top of that quarry added a few bushes. And also the scene where Hongo takes off his glove and realizes his cyborg self, that's actually a rubber glove behind the scenes. And the moment he rips open his helmet to see said conversion, all of that is actually CGI, which to my surprise, I thought it was just prosthetic makeup, but nope, all CGI. It's pretty good. While some of the use is either impressive or understandable, It also looks a bit unfinished at times. Like Kumo Og's additional arms when he strangles the professor, it actually makes the arms look a bit more plasticky at best. It's not as groundbreaking or revolutionary as other toku media like Godzilla Minus One, but it's still a step up compared to what you normally see in a modern tokusatsu show. After Hongo wins the fight, he still sulks about the pain he caused as Ruriko pep talks him into what it means to be a hero by implying in kanji, pain and happiness have a one-stroke difference, as it also symbolizes that making sacrificial decisions while saving others is a tough decision on what it means to be a hero. To endure pain while maintaining happiness for others. In a way, it's kind of the Japanese equivalent of with great power comes responsibility in this case. And for those that know the show as well as the behind-the-scenes stuff, Hiroshi Fujioka's start had a dark and ominous tone in the first 13 episodes, and until he had that motorcycle accident on his left leg, he had to get replaced by Hayato Ichimonji's actor, portrayed by Takeshi Sasaki, and the tone definitely became more brighter and made the show more successful as a result. So implementing that with this message is, damn, that's some good writing there. After the fight, it's where we get our introduction to the big baddie as well as some of his good time boys. Hayato Ichimonji before his conversion to Kamen Rider Nigo. K, who is a reference to Robot Detective K, but according to a small Google search I've done, is unfortunately like a spy who keeps track from a faraway distance, and doesn't really contribute that much to the plot outside of that. And then the original character currently in charge of things with this organization in this multiverse, Ichiro Midorikawa. A couple of things to note about his character is he's methodical, he wears regret on his sleeve, he knows his shit, and he's a mad man. Another thing to note about him outside of being the Cho-Ogu, he also becomes Kamen Rider Daizerogo, which was originally an unused concept of Shotaro Ishinomori's manga, created by producer Toru Hirayama. So to see that get carried over from any part of Ishinomori's creation was a nice touch, while also giving the character sympathy and motivation. You understand where he's coming from after his and Ruriko's mother was murdered, and why he's the only Midorikawa keeping this organization up and running, because it really made a huge difference in his life negatively, leaving him to insanity by making his goal to take away all of humanity's prana, and create his own hell called the Habitat Sekai, the Habitat Realm. God damn, that's mean! After that, it's where we get another introduction to Tachibana and Taki, who instead of being a mentor and an FBI agent respectively, are actually government officials asking to help bring down Shocker. It's also here where we learn Shocker was founded by a billionaire using robotic AI to pursue happiness, hence the reason why K is in this film. And after being tasked to carry on his goal, straight up shoots himself like, why? I know why, but why off himself like that? One thing longtime fans are gonna complain about is Shocker here isn't a former Nazi organization looking to make enhancements in science for world domination like in the show as well as in the manga. Look, if you're gonna compare this info dump to what was in the show or manga, and be livid by saying, where's the E in this? Then no, it's not that Shocker we've known for nearly 53 years at this point. While there are instances in other installments that Shocker is involved with, this is a modern reboot of that original story from 1971. So implementing that amount of World War II history into this film, as well as the traditional salutes, I don't think it would slide well in today's case. So I'm not mad about this change personally. Also, can we talk about the cyclone that follows Hongo and Ruriko around like Autovagin? And that the pre-Henshin cyclone is a real motorcycle with that kind of technology Honda of all places has implemented? I'd love to have that. Oh, also the prop suitcase that carries the gun is also the same as the Fai's gearbox. Even after the one Easter egg in Shin Godzilla, I think Anno and Honda both have a thing for Fai's as well. I can't help but chuckle every time I see those two things coexist, especially in the same movie. After the team-up, we see Ruriko encounter Komori Ogu, who already has perfected a bat virus to start an endemic of all things. But after Hongo decides he doesn't want to repeat the same mistakes as his father did, and some reprogramming to the prana system dupes the bat's virus scheme. Now let's talk about Ruriko's character here. While she was a character that didn't get enough screen time and became a damsel in distress, not wanting to trust Hongo after what happened with the professor. Her character is definitely a step up in this picture. There was a mention in the show of her helping Hongo overseas to stop Shocker, and it's also why Fujioka's leg had to be recovered behind the scenes. But we never got to see that, as she became one of the many female side characters that was just there and didn't really contribute a whole lot to the plot either, but wasn't entirely useless either. Here, we see her fight alongside Hongo, we see her stand up for herself when convenient, and she's always fully prepared. And she'll say that as many times as Gentaro wants to shove friendship down our throats. By the way, fuck Forze. The only inclusion I'm iffy about her arc is the decision of her being a cyborg as well. Not in the same sense of Hongo because plot armor, but more of a computational organism in the sense that they added this. Like, I would have been fine if they at least made her a tech-savvy character, but the fact that she's also what Hongo is, that's odd. Like, I get Shocker here is an alleged sustainable happiness organization of buttfuckery and trying to mess with science to the best of their advantage, but it feels out of left field for Ruriko of all characters. Then after Komori Ogu gets redshirted, it's where we see Sasori Ogu, who gets the shortest amount of screen time out of all the Ogs while also chewing the scenery at the same time, but unfortunately gets quickly taken down by the government officials as a means to extract her venom and put it in a specific bullet to gun down Hachi Ogu later on, who also shared a friendship with Ruriko, just like in the show, while the two were still in Shocker together while Hiromi stood by their side and continues, even after being told to leave but decided to build her own colony off-screen, and controls the minds of the innocent people to use them as her slaves essentially. After Hongo takes out part of the tower, I love how the fight plays out while Hongo fights Hachiogu, showcasing their different uses of prana and the side effects of said uses, especially with Hongo still trying to maintain his actions while being helmeted, while still trying to keep that balance of keep fighting, while Hachiogu wants him to acknowledge happiness for all she's done for Shocker in her own twisted mind. And while on the topic of Hiromi, I do like her kimono and honeycomb undersuit aesthetic. I actually like that change for the character a lot, and for those that know Anno's portfolio, he and his team use the anime fast-paced editing skills in this fight, an obvious nod to the fast-paced editing used in Anno's Cutie Honey film, while also making the smart choice of showcasing these characters' abilities like if it were Takumi as Phase Axel. After a failed stabbing, Hongo gets rage-fueled and attempts to finish Hiromi off, but decides at the very last second not to do that as he doesn't want to uncontrollably kill while still in the helmet. Taki and Tachibana show up with the Sasori virus bullet, showing it to be the only effective thing on Hiromi upon impact, leading her to die and leaving Ruriko traumatized by the incident. And all Taki does is be like, no comment. Me personally, I feel like it would have improved the film a little bit had they carefully extract Komori Og's virus and used that for the bullet instead, and maybe encounter some issues upon producing said bullet, but that's just me. After the fight, we see Shocker spying on them, but decides to pull out their next trump card by pulling out the introduction to the only hybrid Ogu in this film, Chameleon Kamekiri Ogu, or KK Ogu for short. I know it's not something Shocker decides to upgrade until later on in the show when they become Geru Shoka, but it's great to see that inclusion here as well, and give the coolest looking original design for an Og. As for the character's motivation, avenge his brother Kumo Ogu. That's about it, nothing else to add to his arc. After we see the team rendezvous into a new hideout spot, Ruriko dreams about her brother Ichiro, alerting Hongo that he has finally hatched as the Cho Ogu, and where we learn about his scheme that I mentioned earlier on. They decide to confront him and paralyze him while he has a mindset of, it's so easy to destroy happiness because of pain and trust, why can't you understand? Leading Ruriko to pass out for a few seconds and exchange this line with Hongo, then he lets Ichimonji do the work for him. I also love how they incorporated not only the first henshin, but also the first posing after said henshin. It's touch-ups like these to actually invoke what happens in the show that just makes... it's such icing on top of the cake. But after that, he decides to chase after Hongo, challenge him into a Dragon Ball-style fight, complete with the punches and kicks in the air, as a means for Hongo to collect his prana in his system, while Ruriko works her way to reprogram Ichimonji's mind, and speaking of which, literally tosses Hongo in the air to break his leg. Another reference I wasn't expecting to see pop up regarding Fujioka's incident. Which coincidentally, Sosuke also injured his leg on set. Though whether or not it was from a motorcycle accident, I'm not sure, but it screams painful commitment regardless. And speaking of which, it's surprising to see him and Ichimonji's actor, Tasuku Emoto, provide their own stunts in this film with the non-CG stunts, as do some of the other actors that portray the characters with faces to help out the stunt team as well. Ruriko decides to step in to return Ichimonji back to his normal self and give him the red muffler to resemble the color of heroism, just as she did for Hongo, and gets stabbed by KK Olgu and be like, "Surprise, motherfucker!" only for Ichimonji to step in and fight him as Kamen Rider as well. And while at it, Hongo tries to save Ruriko, but it doesn't matter if Hongo has a broken limb. His friend who rescued him is dying, and he's still carrying on his own promise to help others. That and the fact that she gives Hongo the last of her prana as well as her will on top of that, as well as the music implemented here, makes for a really sad moment in the film as well, adding sympathy for both of our heroes, and acknowledging the pain that they have to succumb to, both emotionally and mentally. This as well as Hiromi's death, it just tugs at the heartstrings, and on top of Hongo watching her will inside the helmet, as well as his reaction, really adds more sympathy to the character afterwards. This is a fantastic but sympathetic direction they took to add more to his arc. Like, god damn it really makes us feel for him in this sense. Hongo and Ichimonji eventually go their separate ways as Ichimonji decides he doesn't want to be a part of the herd, and continues his journalistic photography duties and says he wants to fight Shocker alone, while Hongo gets a pep talk from Taki and Tachibana about the day of his father's death, saying he would have been stronger had Hongo stepped in to save his father, but as he was dying, asked about the safety about the hostage as well as the criminal, making Hongo realize his father was caring more about them rather than the family he left. That's just... god damn it, Anno! But after the pep talk about how people experience despair differently, and testing how his leg feels, requests a favor from them and comes across what is by far the worst lit scene in the entire film, at least when it was released in theaters. Keep in mind, I understand that this was Shocker's doing. I understand the importance in this story where they introduced the Shocker Riders. I understand the inclusion in this reboot, but it looks jarring compared to the other scenes I mentioned prior with the use of CGI. And while the motorcycle scenes aren't that badly lit, it's where they actually decide to fight with their actual bodies that actually starts to make things look worse. And it should be worth noting that the original scene was supposed to take place in the rain just like in the manga, which makes me really hope this gets an official physical release with deleted scenes and maybe an alternate cut of the film. In fact, if you look at the behind the scenes documentary on the film, which is incredibly revealing, not only was there a lot that has been shot at the first rough cut of the film and omitted later, there was also trouble on the set with the actors and Anno himself, as he wanted the film to be in his own image, only to scare the action director away after trying to film the climactic fight and proclaim, "This all looks staged, I want it to be real." And you see the look on the actors' faces being dead worried from the predicament, but while some will argue that it's Anno's doing with how the final act is what it is, it's also a consistent pattern with him. Even in a video talking about the issues on the set by Ayaku Web, it wasn't the first time making his actors want them to do the vision that he wants. However, since I'm a PTSD survivor who hasn't seen Evangelion, nor do I think I could stomach it personally, I don't think Anno's the kind of guy you want intensely directing things to scar your actors for life. Just saying. So Hongo encounters the Shocker Riders, while Ichimonji steps in to help out after making up his mind to help others as well as cut the formalities. Then after killing all 11 of them, the two come across Ichiro who showcases his abilities and henshins into the Cho-Olgu, or Kamen Rider Dai Zerogo, and brutally dominates the scene with his OP use of prana. But eventually as Hongo and Ichiro wrestle things out while Hongo tells him all the pain is in his head, leads Ichimonji to headbutt their helmets wide open, leaving Hongo to take off his helmet to let Ichiro see Ruriko while being paralyzed, and finally reverts back to normal after seeing her one last time. And it's also here where we see Hongo acknowledge the fact that he's willing to give up his own life after overusing his prana, leaving the two to dissolve, and leaving Ichimonji to be the only rider left. After being confronted by Taki and Tachibana as they acquire Hongo's helmet, they alert him about Cobra Ogg's whereabouts and request him to take on the role as Kamen Rider, as that was Hongo's wish, but requests a new cyclone and suit, claiming the new helmet isn't as cold as the other one prior. One thing I will say about the suit is while it's very iconic and beautiful, I still wish it had the traditional silver boots and gloves to complete the look. It still looks great as it is. Also, Ichimonji filling in Hongo's shoes after Hongo died. That's also another manga reference. And while riding to his destination, Hongo communicates with Ichimonji via the helmet's programming about how much he loves the wind and how he feels exactly what Ichimonji feels, continuing the legacy of Kamen Rider, and take down Shocker. So that's Shin Kamen Rider, and if I could sum it up in 10 words or less, it has problems, but I fucking love it. Even if it's my first film to see in a Japanese cinema, it's also another film I could rewatch and not fall asleep on. And while Hideaki Anno is both a creative genius and a problematic person as well, he never misses a detail with the original source material. It's a 2-hour movie that feels like a roller coaster made for a specific audience. And it shows with his love for Kamen Rider as well as respect the legacy of Shotaro Ishinomori as well as the genre of tokusatsu. The first 2 acts do hold up on their own, but it's the third act that could have been better, but wasn't too poorly executed either. But it's still passable nonetheless. And I'm glad to be one of the many fans to witness the film and its ups and downs and all-arounds, and why it's important to not only help others as well as ourselves, but to also carry our burden how we see fit, make us evolve ourselves while finding ways to give us that strength, and be the better versions of ourselves on top of that. You need to be there for others. You need to understand that you also have your own battles to fight as well. And you need to be self-aware in instances like this. And it's not an easy task to do. But you have to do your best not only for yourself, but for others. But if you want to get into Kamen Rider, this isn't a bad place to start. But I do hope you have a great time watching this as well as more from this legendary series, and getting the opportunity to share this with others. And remembering the importance of bouncing back from self-isolation, sacrifice, and protecting humanity, all in one. Also, Anno surprised his actors by saying that he's making a sequel without any kind of heads up. Okay, thanks, bye, can't wait for it!